Jack groaned as consciousness returned, his body aching like he'd been hit by a freight train. His eyes flickered open, but the blinding white light overhead made him wince. The air smelled sterile, like antiseptic and polished metal. He tried to move, only to find his wrists and ankles strapped down. What the hell? A shadow loomed over him. Multiple shadows. He blinked again. Standing around his medical bed were three of the most stunning women he'd ever seen. Well, stunning in a terrifying, military-grade way. They were tall, Amazonian really, with smooth, shimmering skin in various shades of violet and deep blue. Piercing silver eyes scanned him with an unsettling mix of curiosity and detachment. Their form-fitting uniforms did nothing to hide their battle-scarred, toned physiques. One woman, standing at the center, exuded pure authority. Short-cropped platinum hair, a scar along her jaw, and a permanent scowl. Her arms were crossed, eyes locked on him like he was an uncooperative prisoner of war. "Subject is awake," she said flatly. The one beside her, wearing what looked like a lab coat, tapped a sleek tablet, glancing at him clinically, like a bug under a microscope. "Vital stable. No signs of further contamination." Jack tried to lift his head. "Yeah, hi. Quick question. Who the hell are you people?" The commander's eyes narrowed. "We are Xyrenians. You are aboard our ship." Xyrenians? That name tickled something in the back of Jack's mind. Some warrior race known for their brutal efficiency. Not the kind of people you wanted to wake up restrained in front of. Jack sighed, testing the straps. "Right. Cool. You want to tell me why I'm tied down?" The scientist, Dr. Velshira, judging by the name on her uniform, tapped on her tablet, expression unreadable. "For containment purposes," she said. Jack froze. "Containment?" Commander Zyra stepped closer, looking down at him like he was a grenade with a loose pin. "Our scans detected an anomaly in your anatomy," she said. "A parasitic growth." Jack blinked. "A what now?" Dr. Velshira turned her screen toward him. A holographic projection of his naked body rotated slowly in the air, with a bright red warning symbol flashing over his groin. Jack stared. Then he stared harder. Then he looked back at them. "You've got to be kidding me." The youngest of the trio, a wide-eyed ensign with short purple hair, pointed at the projection and whispered, "It's moving." Jack groaned, throwing his head back against the pillow. "It's not a parasite," he said, exasperated. "It's my dick." A horrified silence fell over the room. Dr. Velshira's brows knit together. "You're what?" "My dick," Jack repeated slowly. "You know, male genitalia. Standard human equipment. I was born with it." Ensign Yella made a choking sound. The color drained from her already pale violet skin. "You mean you live with that thing attached to you at all times?" Jack stared at her. "Yes." Commander Zyra's jaw tightened. "Disgusting." Jack's mouth fell open. "Disgusting? Lady, I'll have you know it's very well maintained." Velshira wasn't listening. She zoomed in on the scan, muttering to herself. "I fail to see its function," she said, tilting her head. "It appears external. Vulnerable. Inefficient." Jack scowled. "Inefficient?" Zyra crossed her arms. "If it serves no vital purpose, we should proceed with removal." Jack tensed. "I'm sorry, what now?" Velshira nodded, already pulling up a menu on her tablet. "It would be the safest course of action. We can excise it quickly and seal the wound within minutes. Minimal blood loss." Jack started thrashing against the restraints. "I need that." Ensign Yellow looked horrified. "Why?" Jack opened his mouth, paused, trying to find the right words without making this weirder than it already was. It's used for reproduction. Velshira actually frowned for the first time. That's absurd. The reproductive organs are internal. A much more effective evolutionary adaptation. Jack grimaced. Yeah, well, humans do it differently. Zyra's expression darkened. Prove it. Jack's brain short-circuited. Prove it? Velshira tapped her chin. We have extensive biological databases, but no reference for human mating behavior. If this appendage is critical for reproduction, then it must have a function. Yella, still visibly disturbed, whispered, You put it inside someone. Jack, realizing exactly how this sounded, sagged against the bed in defeat. Yes. Yella looked like she was going to faint. Velshira just hummed, typing rapidly into her tablet. Zyra, still staring at him like he was some kind of alien monstrosity, exhaled sharply. Ridiculous, she muttered. Jack groaned. I promise you, it's very normal. Velshira glanced at the commander. Commander, should we proceed with removal or... No. Jack shouted so loudly the entire room startled. Listen. Let's not be hasty here. You don't just go around chopping off pieces of people because they confuse you. Zyra's eyes narrowed. Then you will have to explain its function in detail. Jack stared at her. Then he sighed deeply. Oh, for fuck's sake, he muttered. I can't believe I'm about to have the talk with a bunch of alien warrior women. Yella gulped. Velshira tilted her head, awaiting the lesson. Zyra's expression remained unreadable. Jack mentally prepared himself for the most awkward biology lecture of his life. And somehow, he knew this was only the beginning. Jack exhaled sharply, rubbing his temples, as he prepared to give a crash course on human biology to a bunch of stunning, yet terrifyingly ignorant alien warriors. He had faced many challenges in his life, crash landing on an unknown planet, nearly dying of oxygen deprivation, but trying to explain the function of his dick to a trio of scandalized, hyper-disciplined Zyrenian women. That was a new one. Okay, he began, clearing his throat. So, in human reproduction, the male and female. Velshira cut him off, tapping impatiently on her tablet. We know how reproduction works, human. Egg meets sperm. Embryo forms. Offspring develops. Your explanation is unnecessary. Jack squinted at her. Then why the hell are we having this conversation? Ensign Yella still looked pale, her hands clutching at her uniform. Because your external reproductive organ defies logic, she said, as if the words alone caused her physical pain. You physically insert it? Inside the female? Jack's jaw clenched. Yes, that's how sex works. Yella let out a horrified squeak and took a step back. Velshira merely squinted at him, as if this revelation demanded immediate scientific study. Commander Zyra, however, stayed silent. Her piercing silver eyes locked onto his face, her expression unreadable. Let me get this straight, Velshira continued, tilting her head. This appendage becomes engorged with blood to facilitate the process? Jack felt his dignity dying a slow, painful death. Yeah. Yella visibly shuddered. So, you have no control over it? Jack sighed. Look, it's not like it just goes off whenever it feels like it. It requires stimulation. Yella gasped audibly. Zyra's eye twitched. Velshira typed something rapidly into her tablet. Jack groaned. Oh, come on! Zyra, who had remained composed up until now, crossed her arms. This process sounds inefficient, she muttered. Jack gave a bitter laugh. Tell me about it. Velshira kept studying the hologram, lips pursed. And this process of insertion, this mating, is done voluntarily. Among your kind? Jack blinked. Well, yeah. Of course. It's not just about reproduction, though. It's about pleasure, connection, Intimacy. Yella looked absolutely appalled. You mean you do this for enjoyment? Jack's brows furrowed. Yeah. Who the hell doesn't? Velshira and Yella exchanged nervous glances. Zyra, on the other hand, had gone very still. Jack narrowed his eyes. Wait a second. He looked between them, realization dawning. You guys don't. Silence. Velshira cleared her throat. Zyrian reproduction is strictly a controlled process. Genetic material is extracted in a sterile environment and combined for optimal offspring development. There is no physical component. Jack stared. You mean you've never? Yella shook her head violently. We do not speak of such things. Jack blinked. Holy shit. Velshira sighed. Primitive species often resort to unnecessary physical acts for bonding. It is inefficient and filled with biological risks. We, however, have evolved beyond the need for. Okay, that's it. Stop. Jack yanked against his restraints. I'm not listening to a race of repressed space nuns tell me how inefficient sex is. Zyra, who had remained silent through the entire discussion, spoke at last. And yet, your kind seem to place great value on it. Jack turned to her. Because it's important. It's not just about making babies. It's about trust. Passion. The sheer goddamn joy of it. Velshira scoffed. It sounds messy. Jack smirked. Oh, it is. But that's the fun part. Yella looked on the verge of fainting. Zyra, however, just kept watching him, her expression carefully neutral. Velshira frowned at the hologram. If what you say is true, then your species must be heavily influenced by this biological function. Jack grinned. You have no idea. Velshira nodded. This requires further research. Jack froze. What kind of research? Velshira tapped her tablet. Behavioral study. Jack's stomach sank. I don't like how that sounds. Velshira looked at Zyra. Commander, I recommend we conduct a controlled experiment. If this appendage truly serves a functional purpose in human bonding, we must analyze its effects firsthand. Jack's eyes widened. Whoa, whoa, whoa. You're talking about sex, aren't you? Yella gasped. You wish to engage with him. Velshira lifted a brow. For science. Jack laughed nervously. That's not how science works. Velshira turned to Zyra. Commander? Zyra held Jack's gaze for an excruciating moment. Then, to his absolute shock, she spoke. Proceed. Jack's breath hitched. Wait. What? Velshira nodded. Very well. Yella made a panicked noise. Commander, are you suggesting we participate? Zyra didn't blink. It is our duty to understand all aspects of alien species. If this function is crucial to human interaction, we must verify its validity. Jack's brain was short-circuiting. Hold on. This is moving way too fast. Velshira ignored him. Then we shall begin immediately. Yella staggered back. I am not mentally prepared for this. Jack thrashed against the straps again. Okay, I appreciate the enthusiasm, but let's not rush into. Velshira cut him off with a sharp look. Relax, human. This is purely a professional endeavor. Jack stared at her. Professional. Right. Velshira tapped her tablet, and to his complete shock, the restraints clicked open. Jack sat up warily. Zyra stepped forward, towering over him, silver eyes burning into his. If this experience is as meaningful as you claim, then we will judge for ourselves. Jack gulped. Velshira studied him carefully. Unless, of course, you were lying? Jack gritted his teeth. Oh, now it's a challenge. Zyra arched a brow. Are you saying you're unwilling? Jack exhaled slowly. Then, gritting despite himself, he stood. Oh, I'm willing, he said, cracking his neck. But don't say I didn't warn you. Velshira nodded, making a final note on her tablet. Then let the experiment begin. Jack sat on the examination table, running a hand through his hair as he tried to process what was happening. He had been in some weird situations before, but this was something else. Across from him, Velshira was inputting data into her tablet, her expression as unreadable as ever. Yella was still pale, her hands clutching at the fabric of her uniform, like she was fighting the urge to flee the room entirely. Meanwhile, Zaira stood with her arms crossed, watching him in a way that made his skin prickle, not out of fear, but something else. Something he wasn't sure how to interpret yet. I just want to clarify, Jack said slowly, before this experiment goes any further. Are we talking about a theoretical study? Or do you three actually plan on? Velshira cut him off. Physical analysis is required. Jack let out a strangled laugh. Right. Of course. Science. Yella let out a small whimper. This is highly inappropriate. Velshira arched a brow. You volunteered to assist. I didn't think we'd go this far. Zaira, who had remained silent throughout most of the exchange, finally spoke. We are at an impasse. Jack turned toward her. Oh, how so? Zaira studied him carefully. You insist this act is vital to human relationships. We have no frame of reference. To judge its importance, we must experience it. Jack gave her a lopsided grin. Well, when you put it like that, Velshira ignored his tone. We must approach this with a logical methodology. Jack rolled his eyes. That's the least sexy way to phrase it, but all right. Velshira continued. We will assess the process in 3 stages. First, physical compatibility. Second, sensory response. Third, psychological evaluation. Jack blinked. You guys really know how to kill the mood, huh? Velshira ignored him, gesturing to a separate chair. Commander, as ranking officer, you will determine the first phase. Jack's brow shot up. Oh, we're just diving in. Zaira held his gaze. You are the one who claimed this is a necessary function. Jack licked his lips. I mean, yeah, but I didn't think you'd take me this seriously. Velshira crossed her arms. Are you backing out? Jack scoffed. Absolutely not. Yella made a noise like her brain had officially melted. Zaira stepped forward, and suddenly Jack was very aware of how tall she was. Her sharp, silver eyes never wavered as she stood in front of him, their proximity making his pulse quicken. This process, she murmured. It is pleasurable. Jack swallowed. That's one way to put it. Zaira's gaze flickered downward for a brief second before returning to his face. Then demonstrate. Jack let out a slow breath. All right, he murmured, lifting a hand to her waist. Let's see if we can find some common ground here. Yella let out a strangled gasp. Velshira, do something. Velshira tapped on her tablet. I am recording data. Zaira didn't flinch as Jack's fingers skimmed her side. Her body was warm, warmer than he expected. When he tightened his grip slightly, she tensed, her breath hitching just the smallest fraction. Jack smirked. Nervous, Commander? Zaira's gaze sharpened. Hardly. Jack leaned in, voice dropping. That's so? Because your body says otherwise. Velshira raised a brow. Intriguing. The male seems to use verbal cues as part of stimulation. Jack chuckled. Yeah, it's called flirting. Yella covered her face. I hate this. Jack ignored her, tilting his head slightly as he met Zaira's unwavering gaze. Tell me, Commander, you ever been touched like this before? Zaira's jaw tightened. Jack grinned. Thought so. Velshira made a note. Subject Zaira exhibits hesitation but no rejection. Preliminary analysis suggests potential for... Jack cut her off. Would you please stop narrating? Velshira frowned. How else will we document the results? Jack sighed. I dunno, quietly. Zyra suddenly gripped his wrist, stopping his movement. Her grip was firm, but not painful. Testing. Evaluating. Jack's heart thumped. You're not afraid, she murmured. Jack smirked. Should I be? Zyra said nothing. Velshira observed them with sharp interest. Fascinating. There seems to be an unspoken challenge occurring. Jack exhaled slowly. Yeah. We call it sexual tension. Yella let out a strangled sound. I cannot be here for this. Zyra released him, her expression unreadable. Enough. Jack blinked. Wait, what? Zyra straightened, regaining full control of herself. We have sufficient data. Jack stared. That's it? Zyra nodded. Yes. Velshira, however, did not look convinced. Commander, I propose an additional phase of testing. Zyra's eye twitched. Explain. Velshira steepled her fingers. We have only tested initial reaction. We have yet to analyze full engagement. Jack's stomach flipped. Define full engagement. Velshira tilted her head. A proper examination of human mating practices. Jack stared. You mean sex? Velshira nodded. Yes. Yella squeaked. Absolutely not. Jack gawked. You were just calling it inefficient 5 minutes ago. Velshira shrugged. Further testing is necessary. Jack looked at Zyra. Are you really gonna let this happen? Zyra's silver gaze met his. Jack saw it then, the tiniest flicker of curiosity. She held his gaze for a long moment before answering. Proceed. Yella screamed. Jack took a slow breath, staring at the 3 alien women like he was trying to process a malfunctioning AI. So just so I have this straight, after all that back and forth, now you're actually considering the idea. Velshira nodded, completely unfazed. Scientific integrity requires thorough testing. Jack scoffed. Oh, now it's about integrity. Not 5 minutes ago, you wanted to cut my junk off like it was a defective engine part. Yella was pressed against the wall, looking like she wanted to phase through it. This is madness. We are warriors, not breeding subjects. Zyra, ever composed, studied Jack with calculating silver eyes. The human did claim this process strengthens bonds. If this is true, understanding it may be of strategic value. Jack ran a hand down his face. You don't strategize sex. You do it because you're into someone. Because there's chemistry, attraction, a spark. Velshira interrupted. You claim there is no structured process, yet your description suggests clear requirements. Jack groaned. Not requirements, just preferences. People like different things. Velshira made a note. Customizable parameters. Noted. Jack exhaled through his nose. I cannot believe I'm explaining this. Zyra stepped closer. Then demonstrate. Jack blinked. Wait, what? Zyra arched a brow. You claim this act is based on mutual interest. If so, convince me. Jack stared. You want me to seduce you? Zyra nodded. Yella made a strangled noise. Commander, this is completely inappropriate. Zyra's gaze didn't waver. If the human's claims are correct, then his actions should elicit a response. If not, then his method is flawed, and we abandon the test. Jack rubbed his temples. This has got to be the least sexy setup in history. Velshira crossed her arms. Then fail, and we will disregard his previous claims about bonding. Jack narrowed his eyes. Oh, now it's a challenge. Zyra tilted her head. Yes. Jack's smirk returned. All right, Commander. Let's see how you handled human persuasion. Velshira activated her scanner. Data recording. Jack shot her a look. Vel, if you narrate one more thing, I swear to. She sighed and muted the device. Jack turned back to Zyra, stepping forward just enough to test her reaction. She didn't flinch, but he could tell she was hyper-aware of the shift in space between them. All right, first rule of seduction, Jack murmured. It's not about what you do, it's about what you don't do. Zyra's brow furrowed slightly. Explain. Jack lifted a hand but didn't touch her. Instead, he let the heat of his palm hover just shy of her skin, the space between them charged with unspoken tension. Zyra's breath caught. Jack grinned. See? Anticipation. Your mind fills in the blanks before I even move. Velshira raised an eyebrow. So it is a psychological battle. Jack chuckled. In a way. His voice dropped lower. But the second rule? Contact. His fingers just barely grazed Zyra's hip. Not forceful. Just enough to linger. Zyra's jaw tensed. Jack tilted his head, watching her carefully. Tell me, Zyra, are you nervous? She exhaled slowly. No. Jack smirked. Then why is your pulse spiking? Velshira tapped her scanner. Notable increase in heart rate. Jack chuckled. Told ya. Yella whimpered. I hate this. I hate all of this. Jack ignored her, instead letting his fingers slowly trace up Zyra's side, his touch barely there, just enough to tease. Zyra exhaled sharply. Jack leaned in, voice low. See, this isn't about brute force or biology. It's about reading the moment. His fingers brushed the back of her neck. And knowing when to push, he gave the slightest pressure, enough to test. Zyra's breath hitched. Jack grinned. And when to pull away. He stepped back. Zyra blinked. For the first time, she looked thrown off. Jack smirked. See? That's the power of human interaction. Velshira nodded. Fascinating. The subject is destabilized. Zyra glared. I am not destabilized. Jack chuckled. Could have fooled me, Commander. Velshira tapped her chin. I propose further testing. Yella squeaked. No. Jack threw up his hands. I'm not some lab experiment. Velshira tilted her head. You are the one who insisted this process is integral to human relationships. Jack groaned. Yeah, but I didn't sign up to be a demonstration model. Zyra, regaining her composure, folded her arms. I admit, there was merit to your method. Jack smirked. Oh, so I did get to you. Zyra's gaze narrowed. Barely. Jack grinned. You know, for a race of warriors, you guys blush really easily. Velshira made another note. Possible heightened physiological response to human interaction. Jack rolled his eyes. Or, maybe you just liked it. Zyra didn't reply. Jack's smirk widened. Oh, now that's interesting. Yella threw up her hands. I am leaving. I cannot witness any more of this. Jack chuckled. Don't be jealous, Yella. There's plenty of human charm to go around. Yella bolted from the room. Velshira sighed. A loss of an additional test subject. Jack snorted. You're not gonna get everyone involved in this. Velshira adjusted her notes. Then we shall continue focused analysis. Jack sighed. I'm so getting hazard pay for this. Zyra met his gaze one last time. You are intriguing, human. Jack smirked. That's one way to put it. Velshira typed the final entry into her report. Experiment inconclusive. Further testing required.